Previously on agentpalmer.com, a reflection of things unfinished and unwritten. Is worst person ever a condemnation of us all? And both Stephanie and I are very thankful for the congratulations we received from those of you who didn't know about our nuptials but learned about it during the last two episodes. This is the Palmer Files, episode 140, with Bill, Kristen, NJ, Essa, Stef, Jess, and Danno discussing voices, not working, dinner, communication, decisions, and perhaps even some sociology, or perhaps it's psychology, and more from the one final questions after credits of this very podcast. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 140th episode are Bill, Kristen, NJ, Essa, Stef, Jess, and Danno. What you are about to hear is One Final Question Volume 5, this time spanning episodes 101 to 125, which conveniently picks up where Volume 4 ended at 100. As with previous volumes, you will not be hearing all 25 questions, just a select few. For some of you, you've heard all of these before because you listen to every episode all the time, all the way until it's completed, and I thank you for that. For others, you may have missed one or two of these either because you didn't listen to the episode or you didn't get an opportunity to listen all the way to the end. No matter the reason, I encourage you to enjoy this trip through what is, what was, and what could be. The criteria for selection remains my whim. Some questions were too reliant on having heard the entire episode prior to it. Those didn't make the cut. Some were just too long. Those didn't make the cut either. These selections should all stand on their own and be of reasonable length. You will hear guests ask me about my past, present, and future. We discuss voices, not working, dinner with Dylan, snapshots across the years, deciding what you want to do, lawyers, introvert versus extrovert, and, because occasionally we wander, all of that and a whole lot more is coming your way shortly. But first, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all contact links for each of my guests in the show notes, as well as links to each of the episodes they were pulled from. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Bill, you have one final question for me.
Yeah. I got a question. Before Mike, we briefly spoke, because we were talking about what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could talk about AI, you know what I mean? And you were like, well, I'm sure we both have the same opinion, basically. Not a fan, generally speaking.
Not a fan.
Certainly not in the way that it's going right now with the creative outlets kind of being it being used in those creative outlets. Anyway, but if there's any one celebrity voice that you could use to on like any part of your show, like what voice, and then where in the show, and like how would you use it if you were like kind of like using it to do something that you already do?
So maybe like the cold open.
Right. Cold open or the wrap up or both. You know what I mean? Instead of like your voice doing the intro and outro, or the open tag, the very cold open tag.
Yeah, I think it would just be that cold open like previously on. And I feel like any voice. Like alive or dead.
Point.
I guess, like,
yeah. I mean, if it's a voice that would be known, of course. I mean, you can say Abraham Lincoln, but outside of a movie, we don't really know what he sounded like. You know,
I feel like, oh man. So there's a couple of things. The first is I want it to be different than mine.
Sure.
So immediately I'm going across the pond.
Oh, okay. You mean this accent?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Sure.
Different accent.
Cool.
And so I watch a lot of British panel shows. And the top two voices
Right.
that I would want on to open my show are very different kind of comedians.
Okay.
But I think I'd take either David Mitchell, who is just as cranky as I am.
Okay.
So it would fit.
Sure.
Or Richard Ayoade, who would be just as nerdy as I am.
Oh, wow.
So it would fit. I think those are the two that I would be like, here's my little 45-second cold open. You record that for me, send it back. We'll be good. Perfect.
On that note, I would suggest what's the name of the guy who hosts Taskmaster?
Oh, Greg Davies.
Greg Davies. I would say, but he's got to be just as snide and snippy and fast talking as he is when he's like reading off those one-liners and shit. Like, you know what I mean?
Not happy Greg Davies, but like stern.
But like, you know, very dismissive. Like, you know, like my bit. You know what I mean? My whole kind of shtick. You know what I mean? Like, I tend to feel like when I watch that show, because that's like the only one I kind of watch. You know what I mean? Is that like, I could do this show if they brought it to the States. Like I sit there and I think that in the back of my head. Oh, that crappy version they tried to make here that didn't work. I could have done it. But
who would have been your right-hand man, Bill?
Well, if I can't have you, and that might be because they think you look too much like the guy who hosted, but you have much better teeth. And that's just not.
I think you and I would be able to pull that off. Actually.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You might laugh too much though at my jokes.
I could probably play the straight man if I like the stoic straight man. I guess because that's what you're looking for, right? You're looking to beat the hell out of me and then have me get one zip in every episode because that's basically that's the bit, right? Like
that's the bit. Yeah. He gets his barbs in, but he's relatively unaffected.
Problem is somebody's gonna have to write those barbs for me.
Oh, they're writing that shit for those guys. So don't worry. But then when you find out that other guy, he's actually the creator of the show. Yeah, he's the creator of the show. Like the main guy, actually. And the whole time he's getting crap all the time. Little something Hall. I forget what his name is. Something Hall, right? Hall is his last name. Because he always goes, Little Jenna Hall, or whatever his name is. And he does this high-pitched voice when he introduces him. But yeah, it doesn't have to be that snarky. Or if I got to bring somebody who's dead, Orson Welles, like
Unicron Orson Welles.
Last days on his deathbed.
Oh God!
Unicron, fucking
previously on the Agent Palmer file.
Yes. It's like is that like a voice changer? What's going on?
Just give him some a lot of reverb. Like just give me Unicron. I want Unicron.
Yeah, I want that slight kind of digitized thing they did to all the Transformer voices on the cartoon. You know, it sounds like, is this a tin can? Like, what are they doing? What's this effect? You know, and just sound like you're about to eat the world. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. You know, but yeah, I mean, that's the way I'm going. You know, because you could go. Everyone's gonna say, "Oh, James Earl Jones." You know, some deep voice.
I want to at least go across the Atlantic. Yeah.
And that makes sense for me knowing you because you watch fucking tons of panel shows. So all right, that fits.
Yeah. All right, Kristen, do you have one final question for me?
Well, we were talking about how I feel about not working for the first time in my life. And I was wondering if you feel that same way. Do you feel like you have less of a purpose in life because you're not working? I never tied work to my self-worth as much as you have. Career was always very important to you. Now that I haven't been working for a year, I feel like that is the biggest weight on my shoulders, is not putting money into our savings, not being able to buy Chris a birthday present with my own money. And I was wondering how you deal with that and if you had any advice on how I can move forward and not feel like that, because you've been in that situation for a while.
It's rough because the only advice I can give you wouldn't work for you. And I say that because what I have found is I have doubled down on being a housekeeper, so to speak. I've doubled down on making sure the house is clean, doing the dishes, and doing the cooking. I have doubled down on at quote unquote contributing to the household in other ways.
Okay.
The career part of it, though, absolutely sucks. And I do not know, without true actual therapy, I don't know what there is to help me with that. Because the more you put yourself out there and get rejected, rejection's not a bad thing. But for me, the hard part is my job search has been twofold. One, it's actually applying for jobs, and the other is the quote-unquote networking when you meet with people that are willing to talk to you either in industries or at companies or whatever. And for me, I would suggest that if you can deal with rejection, just apply for jobs, right? And then that's fine. If you don't get it, you don't get it. For me, the hard part has been the networking in conjunction with the job search. Because what happens is I sit down across from these executives or directors or just former colleagues or former colleagues of colleagues, and they all tell me that I know what I'm doing and that I should be hired and there's this disconnect between the people I'm networking with who see value in what I bring to either a conversation or a question they asked or whatever, and then the fact that nobody actually wants to hire me for that. And so for me, it's that disconnect that weighs down on me. I think if I was just networking and eventually maybe somebody would offer me a job from that would be fine. But you can't just do that. You still have to like apply for things. And so the people that say I have value versus just never hearing back from companies, that disconnect is the part that hurts the most.
Gotcha.
Because you hear that you have, and it's not like, this is not like, oh, your parents always tell you you're special, right? That's not what this is. Like I've met
another problem that we did, by the way. Way too much great jobs. Way too much.
But it is that like all these people tell me that I have value, and then when I put myself on the market, no one's biting.
Right.
And so I would love to believe that those people aren't lying to me, but perhaps it's because they can tell the truth because they don't have to spend their budget on it and nobody wants to spend any money, and it's a whole but I have doubled down on the household of contribute. I need to contribute in some way. Right. And that's just, I can't sit idly by. And Stef's supportive of the podcast, the blog, I do have like a small consultancy where I make a little bit of money. But I would like a job. And I think the worst part about it is, and I've started to consider leading with this in every networking / job thing I do. I'm not looking for my next job for the next 6 months. I'm looking for my job for the next 6 years. Maybe you'll fire me before then, but you don't have to worry about me jumping. Like the problem is people look at anyone between the ages of 30 and 45 right now as people that have jumped from job to job to job. And yes, I have former colleagues that embody that to a T. They probably make exponentially more money than I ever will because they're on company 7 and they've never been fired from one. But I don't want that. Like, right. None of that seems comfortable to me. I want to hitch my wagon to a company and stay there.
Do you think maybe that is something that companies might be scared of? Because it seems like nobody wants to commit to anything anymore. I mean, I think that people might be like, I only want you for 6 months, and if it works out, we'll go from there. Anybody that wants to stay longer, when that might be scary for some companies, especially companies with younger executives. They're like, well, we might not want you in 6 years. So why would I agree to that. Like long-term contracts.
Then I don't want to work for you. Like that's the thing. Like it for me, there is, and maybe
I don't know if that is how it works. I haven't been in the job force for a very long time,
but here's the thing. I don't know how they're thinking, because most of you don't get to talk to those people most of the time. But what I would say is, and maybe I'm extremely old-fashioned in this, but I like to think that if you come to understand the company you're working for, you will do a better job. And that is not something you learn in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah. I know, it just feels like so many people are scared of like commitment. I mean, look at all of these young people living together and not getting married, which was going to be my question.
Hey. All right, NJ, do you have one final question for me?
I absolutely do, and I'm going to drop into this voice for it,
okay,
so that your listeners can hear what I sound like. If you had the opportunity to have dinner with one rock singer, specifically singer, living or dead, who would you choose?
I'm immediately torn. I'm not torn. So the thought process is, I'm immediately torn between the two big ones for me early on, which would have been Steven Tyler and Axl Rose.
Okay.
However, then I had an epiphany in the middle of thinking about choosing between those two, and I went, wait a minute, Bob Dylan could still be considered a rock singer.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm going to go with Bob Dylan final answer.
Oh, nice. That is good. That is honestly a good answer. I think it's better than mine.
Yeah, I've been, so I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I have been listening through all of Taylor Swift's discography, because I know the media personality, but I had never listened to her music. And occasionally, as I've been listening to albums and making notes, because I'll do something with this experiment.
We're creators. We always end up with more information in our heads than we can use.
So I don't know what's going to come of it. And right now I'm just texting back and forth with a friend of mine who's a Swiftie. But and I'm not even into like I just finished, as we record this, I just finished, I think 1989 was the last. So I have a few more albums to go before I even get to the Taylor's versions of things and stuff. Like I get that. But I've also decided that because I was so excited about Angry, the new Stones single, and because I've been listening to a lot of like Dylan radio on Spotify, I've decided I'm going to also go back and listen to some discographies of the Stones and Dylan, because there's parts of those back catalogs that I don't really like. I know, but I don't really know. And the other thing, and I think this is the most important part, when I listen to a Taylor Swift album, because I've never heard it before, that's what I'm doing. I'm sitting down with headphones, earbuds, whatever, and I'm listening to an album, and maybe I'll take notes. I'm not also doing this. I'm sitting down and I'm listening, and I want to do the same thing with Dylan and the Stones, which, by the way, will take me a long time. I'm not doing this every day. Man. It's whatever. But like, I just feel like there's a lot there. And I'm always a sucker for like, well, there's got to be something that's not popular that I'll like. And I there's a part of me that just, I still miss the album. And so
I agree.
It's not even.
We were like one of the last generations who had that as the main source, and the actual A-side, B-side type of record. And
even CDs, because early on, at best, you would get a 3-disc changer. Right. Oh, yeah. But it was 30 seconds between songs if you shuffled between discs. So it's just like hit play. That's fine. And we were the last generation that had it fairly easy, where it was like, I'll borrow that CD from Steve and put it on my mixtape. And so you could kind of make mixtapes a little bit pre-Napster. Like that was what you did. You're like, does anybody have this album? Because I want this song on this thing.
Yeah. Or you listened to the radio and waited for it to come on and recorded it onto tape.
But in the circle I was in, I always knew somebody had owned. And look, we were also the give Columbia House a bad thing and get 10 CDs for a penny and then have it not lapse or whatever.
Yeah.
It's okay. The things we whatever. But the point is, I think it's Bob Dylan. I am okay not even asking a question. I'm cool just eating with him and listening to him talk. I know we recently lost as we record this, Robbie Robertson. So like the band, which is huge in my kind of musical background, like that's just to hear stories. And since Dylan's still alive and to know, the other thing is I love the idea that Dylan was projected as an inspiration for a generation, despite the fact that that's not what he aspired to, which makes
he didn't care about it.
Which makes him...
He wasn't interested.
No, he wasn't, which makes him very different from all of the people now who are aspiring to that to some degree.
Yeah.
And so just the man's got stories for days. He put out, 2 years ago, he put out a 20-minute single, right? Which is basically just him telling stories.
And the thing is, because he's Bob Dylan, he can say "fuck you" and put out a 20-minute single.
Yeah. So it's
dude has a Nobel Prize.
Yeah. It's like I don't think there's anybody else really.
It's interesting. That's honestly a really good choice and probably way better than mine.
Who was yours?
Prince.
I mean, that's pretty good though too.
Incredible songwriter. From everything I understand, just as weird as he seemed, but also a nice guy.
Yeah.
And one of the best modern guitar players ever.
And you know what? Surprisingly humble about the guitar skill.
Yeah.
Look, he wasn't really a humble guy necessarily.
Not by a long shot.
But when it came to guitar, he was amazing. And he never was like, look at me, I'm better than Eddie. Like, that's just not...
That wasn't how he rolled.
Yeah.
And if you ever get the chance, look up... I don't know what it's from, but it's While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and it's Steve Winwood, Tom Petty, a few other musicians, and then
I've heard this
Prince comes on for the solo.
Yeah.
I have played that solo when I need to be inspired that you don't have to fit into the mold to have the style.
Oh, see,
Prince
now
walks out there.
Now I'm thinking about Tom Petty. Still sticking
Tom
with
Petty's
Bob
another
Dylan.
One.
But now I'm thinking about Tom Petty.
Well, you could always ask Bob Dylan about Tom Petty. It's not like they didn't work together, you know? And we wouldn't have to resurrect Bob Dylan. He's still around.
Yeah.
And you could drink his whiskey.
Yeah.
He's got his own label. Heaven's Door Whiskey.
All right. Do you have one final question for me?
Since we have talked multiple times across the years, what is your experience talking to someone with these intervals, interviewing them sometimes about the same topics and about new topics? Like, what is that for you as a podcaster? Like getting these check-ins, these snapshots, these deep dives across the years.
I think part of it's cheating because I do message you in between. So it's not like I'm not coming at this stuff with, well, since the last time she was on, I read both books. Like it's been a little bit more than that. But like I'm within my own circle. This is my function. Okay. Like I'm the one who calls X, Y, and Z friends that no one else talks to because they don't call anybody. But I call enough that they pick up for me, right? So I get to know, I get to check in. And then when I talk to everybody else, I'm like, oh, by the way, so-and-so's doing great, So that it's a role I fill in my non-creative space. And I just like talking to people. Like you and I could do this for a week and probably have a different conversation. Even if I started with the same question every time, I think you and I could have a different conversation each time. And I think that in a day and age where my podcast is not nearly what it could be for two reasons. One, probably not short enough. And two, I don't want it to be short enough. Like, I want to raise the level of attention span in the world. And so there's a part of that. I think that the interesting thing about doing this so infrequently and not being like, well, you can come back next year. Like, you can back annually. Like, annually we can do this. I think it's a testament to how life does and doesn't change in the span of those things. So, like, between the first and the second one that we had was about a year. And we talked about your day job in the first one. And in the second one, you had just put out the first book. And during the first one, we talked a little bit about you writing the first book. And it was just that little snapshot. Now we get to talk about, it's 3 years now, I think, almost to the day that we're recording. Yeah. And it's you've done 2 more books, but you've continued this day job, and you've, just kind of, we've talked about all the things you've learned through the processes. But these are things that if I don't get out of you, and I mean this a little bit selfishly, if I don't get them out of you and learn them through your experience by talking to you and share them with my audience by having you tell me, then there's going to be potential authors out there that are going to be like, well, it is possible to work 17 hours in a day job in a book, but no one's suggesting you do that. And it's important for somebody to say that. It's important, is it wrong? No, I'm not going to say that. The books were wonderful. It clearly worked out on some level, but you also need months now to recuperate. So there's a give and take in that, but that needs to be stated. Because there are quiet people in the back that maybe read your bio and go, okay, full-time job, wrote a trilogy. Anybody can do that. That seems like logical. And without conversations like this in any capacity, at any stage along the way, no one's going to tell that person, hey, maybe take some time. Like, maybe pump the brakes.
Maybe it's hard, yeah.
And this is a theme, and this is the reason I love doing this, is because I get to talk to different people in different places that are creating very different things. And the theme that comes up a little bit more often than it should is it's never as easy as it looks. Like, there's a generation or generations of people out there that think all I do is hit record, talk to you, hit process, and hit publish, which is not the way this works at all. And they're the same people that think you sit down, type your 300 pages, send it to a publisher, and it goes publish and goes out there. And people need to know that you and I are doing this in our spare time, that I take time to, well, I read your books, but I also take time to do a little research. And, we do have a bit of a relationship outside of this, but then this gets edited and you have a day job and, like, there are other things. People, it's always glossed over. Everybody's like, hey, I did this thing. and nobody's out there yelling from the rafters, which is what I feel like I'm doing, going like, hey kid, this is something you can do, but maybe learn that it's not easy.
Yeah, and there's a degree to which, like, especially on social media, you can yell about the successes, you can yell about the exciting things, you can yell about everything positive going on with your life, your career, your process, but you can't always publicly, you don't want to be complaining all the time, you don't want to be down, you don't want to be negative, you don't want to, there's things you can't talk about that you're unhappy about, you know, that's for the group chat offline.
But I'm glad that I'm glad we have group chats, because that's the other side of the coin is you have to let that out. You
have to let that out, and you have to be, I think there's a degree to which it's really valuable to be honest for other people. Like me back in 2019, 2020, there are so many things that I would have loved to have known ahead of time, to have been aware of, to have been warned of, like the peer groups we talked about that I didn't have, you know, the resources, the conversations, those things would have prepared me a lot better, and I maybe could have managed my time better, at least like psychologically, emotionally, been able to parse and navigate some of these things better.
But now you're talking about them on this. I'm sure you've talked about them elsewhere. Hopefully people are listening, like not that people are listening, but hopefully they're taking it to heart. Like hopefully somebody who wants to write a book or start working on a movie, you know.
Yeah, I take what I went through, and I'm the white knight, the paladin. Like anyone newer who wants some knowledge, I will point them the right way or tell them, or like I'm here for those people who were me in the past when I felt like I needed that and didn't have it, but now I know.
Yeah, I mean, since we last talked, I helped produce a movie.
That's awesome.
And I did it from the hours of 9 p.m. because I worked with someone. From 9 to 11 nightly, it felt like, or sometimes till midnight or 1 if we were on a roll. And it's a project that it's one of those projects that had we known what we were getting into beforehand, we probably never would have which is, look, there is an amount to where you just have to jump. But there is a thing where I'm like, maybe people shouldn't do like a third gig, so to speak, as a full-length feature documentary remotely. Like, it worked out for me and Chris, but I don't know if that's the thing everybody should do. But I like the idea that you're out there, and that I can give you a platform to kind of help future people who want to create things.
Yeah, and multi-creatives that are looking to, like, and people that are too creative. Like we were saying at the beginning, it's like too many ideas. Like you can't stop the creative brain. Like you always have something pushing at you that's exciting that wants you to follow it. You have all these threads, and following them is amazing. But at some point, if all of them start to materialize too frequently, you have to, pick your battles, and
you got to go for a walk. Yeah, I mean, you got to get outside. You got to
take a walk. No, that's when I get all the ideas coming. Take a walk, drive my car, take a shower. Anytime that it's harder to write things down is when the ideas come to me.
You're not wrong, but I do try and actively shut it off when that happens.
That's why I listen to podcasts or music or something that can preoccupy that bit, especially podcasts or like audiobooks, nonfiction, where that can preoccupy that part of my brain that wants to chase after little story rabbits, idea rabbits. It helps.
All right, Stephanie, do you have one final question for me?
I do. So you've been, people who might listen to your show may know, or they may not know, that you've been unemployed for quite some time. What could you see yourself doing if it was a lot easier to get hired?
What can I see myself doing?
Yeah, like what kind of, like, do you want to be in the same field? Do you want to try a different field? Like,
I mean, okay. I was in marketing, right? Which in itself is a field, but I'm not a regular marketer. So I don't see myself as I don't see marketing as being a real field. You market the field you're in. So I was in tourism marketing, right? So I was in tourism. I wasn't in marketing. But I'm adaptable. I don't, I could work for anybody really. I like the idea of marketing. I like the idea of, this podcast there's a reason this podcast is this podcast. I like the idea of stories. I mean, this episode was unique, but not every episode is that. I mean, I also have like solo episodes and stuff. So it's not like this podcast is just about telling stories, but mainly it's about telling stories. And that's what marketing is when you boil it down. It's not about TikTok posts and Twitter tweets and Facebook posts and, catching virality. It's about telling the story. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people. So really, I just want to help people. That's it.
Okay, but what does that mean? Like, if you,
it's really hard to say because it depends. If it's in healthcare, it's probably about sharing the values of the brand and then spotlighting and highlighting the doctors and the nurses and the administrators who help that thing come about. If it's a corporate entity, it's probably a similar thing. The VP coaches his son's football team, and this other VP is a assistant basketball coach, and this other one volunteers at Habitat for Humanity, and sharing those stories are important, and I don't think enough brands do that. And you need to share those stories depending on how big it is. If it's a corporation of 20, then you need to share that story with the world. If it's a corporation of 1,000 or more, you need to share that story with the people internally and externally.
But let's say it's not marketing. What else would you want to do besides marketing?
Not marketing. And this is something I want to do, not just, you need money.
Yeah, like just not like you need to go out tomorrow and like find a job. No, if you wanted to do something that's not marketing.
And how does content creation factor into it?
I mean, that's up to you. Like, this is a thing that you would want to do.
I'm trying to answer your question. Because I have no problem saying like I'm just gonna keep recording and writing.
Yeah. So like, is that what you would want to do?
I mean, I'm not gonna stop it when I get a job. So yeah it's what I want to do.
That's the thing, is like, if you could get a job that would still allow you to do the blog and the podcast.
Look, there's not going to be a job that doesn't. I started the podcast while I had a job. I started the blog while I had a job. I continued the blog and the podcast while I had a job. So getting a job doesn't hinder me those things. It would be nice if it was my job, but I don't. I'm going to go with creation. Because
okay.
I'm not averse to producing movies and editing books for other people as well. It doesn't have to be I like having my own venue, but I can do whatever, I think.
All right. So basically being involved in creation, either creating your own things or helping other people create things.
Yeah, which, by the way, is not that dissimilar from my marketing philosophy. So.
Yeah. Which you're already kind of doing now.
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Jess, do you have one final question for me?
I do, Agent Palmer. So my question for you would be, based on our conversation, do you feel that you have a positive outlook on lawyers, a negative one, or are you neutral?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. I mean, I think that your citizens are in good hands. I have a positive outlook on you. I don't know. I mean, generally speaking, I have a positive outlook on lawyers because most of the lawyers I've run into socially are similar to you, where they're just trying to help. But then again, I don't know any of those private attorneys that are billing by the hour and making a lot of money. And even the one time I needed a private lawyer, it was unfortunately more and more like that long contract bullshit where like I probably could have done it myself had it been written in English.
Right.
But I don't have I want to have a positive view on it. I think if I never turned my TV on again, I would have a nothing but positive, like, idea of lawyers. But I think the problem ends up being that I turn on the TV and there's a talking head that's not a congressman and it's not a representative and it's not a mayor or a senator, and it's just like lawyer. just like economist. I hate economist. That one drives me nuts too. Just general like lawyer who's just like talking. And it's like
the talking head lawyers.
Yeah, I'm done with the talking head lawyers. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of, like, I didn't watch Suits. I wasn't the biggest fan of like any of the Law and Orders. I remember a ton of stuff from The West Wing because that was one of my favorite shows.
Love The West Wing. Isn't that the idealistic world of like lawyers and government?
Well, it is, because you had a scenario where there were episodes where the left and the right would have breakfast together and fix something, as opposed to just yelling in the press, which is
what we have.
What we have.
For the record, I am no Babish. That is my role, but I do not have the same.
All right, but what was the John Larroquette? Do you have a cricket bat from? Because John Larroquette played the chief guy before Babish. And he had a cricket bat. Do you have a cricket bat?
I do not.
Somebody should get you a cricket bat, because that
my son does want to play cricket. Yeah. Actually, yeah.
We should get you a cricket.
Maybe in the cards, yeah.
I'm just saying that would be baller. Like, that would be great. But also on the Wednesday night NBC lineup of that era was my favorite law show of all time.
What's that?
Ed.
I didn't see that one.
No, nobody has. It's just like me and like 4 people, but Ed was the bowling alley lawyer. And it was all Ed. It was like 4 seasons. I think it was 4 seasons. And Ed, like, it's the most cliche late 90s or early 2000s like thing. Like, he literally is a lawyer in a big city law. This is the pilot I'm describing. Okay. He's a lawyer in a big city law firm, and he makes one mistake on a 500-page contract, but it's like where the comma is. So he loses
Oxford comma?
What?
An Oxford comma?
No. This is like a comma in like numbers. Like it's like 100,000 instead of 10,000 or something like that. And so he gets fired, finds out his wife is sleeping with the mailman. And then he goes home and ends up buying the old bowling alley in his hometown and starting a small town law practice in it. And that has been my favorite, because it's kind of like some of the other like country, like city lawyer goes to country movies that we've seen. And it's kind of like that, but it's the thing about that show specifically, which is why I like it more than any of the others, is because when it comes to the law, it's generally just him trying to help people. Honestly, he did fairly well as an independent, and nobody ever really talks about how he makes money, because he's always taking like pro bono, or like he's just the cliche good lawyer who's like, wait, so you just need to turn your electricity on, like, and he just gets a notepad out and starts writing. Like, that's what I want all lawyers to. I want them to do it for the good of do, like, I know law school is expensive, but I want them to do it for the sake of doing something good.
Yep.
And not,
It's funny you said that. So I have like a little bulletin board in my office, and I just won like a potentially like multi-million-dollar pension case. But the thing that's on my bulletin board right now is the thank you letter from the lady, because I moved the storage pod in front of her house that was blocking her parking spot.
Yeah.
So I'm all about the Ed. I will have to check it out.
I'm going to have to send you some links.
Definitely.
It's wholesome. That's the other thing too. Like the law.
That shit feels good. It does. It just makes you feel good.
And the law doesn't need to be flashy. Like, I think we've spent too much time in front of the TV. Like we've officially established that the law is A, unreadable and unknowable, and B, it's sexy and flashy and dangerous. And it really is. It's words on the page. It's no more dangerous than any other book. Like it shouldn't be.
And I started this out by debunking Suits. I told you that none of that's real.
Yeah, this is.
So we came full circle. We went all the way around the horn.
All right, Danno, do you have one final question for me?
I have a simple question for you. Introvert, extrovert, somewhere in between. And what's the difference?
Okay. So I believe I would consider myself an introvert.
Okay. Why do you say that?
I get my energy from being alone. The way I took some sociology courses in college, admittedly decades ago at this point.
And sociology has changed over the years, right?
Yes, it has. And I took a psych class or two, but I think somewhere along the way I read in a book, an article, I read somewhere that the difference between an introvert and an extrovert is where they recharge their batteries.
Yeah.
An extrovert recharges their batteries in a group, and an introvert recharges their batteries by themselves.
Yeah. That to me, that seems very reasonable. I'm not sure that's the absolute definition, but I think that definitely describes two types of people.
Yeah. And so I would say I'm an introvert because while I have been able to in the past, and I can work a room as an extrovert might do, I'm exhausted.
Yes.
Like you would have thought I ran 13 Boston marathons if I was just at a party with 200 people working the room, versus this where you and I could go for 12 hours and I'll be refreshed at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you are in a room of 200 people, what's your inclination? Will you work the room because you feel like that's your duty?
No. Well, only if I'm being like, I haven't worked a crowd of 200 people, like a room like that, since my father's retirement party.
Yeah.
Because I knew half the people, and even though it was his night, I'm his only son, and it felt like I had to also make the rounds.
So it kind of was your duty.
So it was kind of a responsibility. But if I don't have any kind of social construct, I'm going to find the 3 people, 2 people, 1 person that I can hang out with and have this conversation in the corner or over dinner. Just in a, not, it doesn't have to be in a corner, but just that's
sure.
That I'm not seeking, like, despite the fact that this is a podcast that goes out to the world, I'm not seeking that in reality. Digitally, that's fine. You know, like I can make that distinction digitally. And look, I played in bands on a stage.
Yeah. I
don't know if I still have that in me. But I think that's a whole different thing, but I feel like it's possible.
You know, there's almost a stereotype of actors and maybe musicians too, people who perform for a living, being introverts. That I just read somewhere, I think it was Henry Fonda would throw up every night before he went on the Broadway stage because he was so nervous about being in front of people. But he was an actor. That was his chosen job.
Yeah.
So what do you think it is that makes some people torn between those two extremes of needing to be seen and yet not wanting to be?
I think it's I would dissect it a bit, and I say it's not about being seen. It's about the job at hand.
The job of acting.
I would probably throw up if we were going to do this live in front of even a group of 100.
Well, I've got a surprise for you, crowd. Come on in.
But I think that I could probably do it because after the first 2 minutes, I'm probably going to, and hopefully, and this is what I think happens even if you're facing the audience, you forget the audience is there. Our job is to put on a show for them.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think that that's where whatever this show has in just you and me wouldn't change in an audience necessarily, except we would probably take questions and, there would be an audience reaction,
right,
which is something I've not, that's the thing I don't have, which is I don't know how to play to a strange crowd. Like when I talk about having like 6 people over, I know the audience. I know the jokes I can tell. I know the jokes I can't tell, which is probably the more important part of that equation. And I know who's going to laugh at what. For an untrained person, I'm not even going to say comedian, just person, to go and try and play to a crowd, I just don't know that I have that in me. But I could probably, I don't know what'll happen before we walk out on that stage. I might need the bucket.
Yeah.
But I think once we get out there,
I would suggest that someone like you who says you're comfortable with a room of 6 because you know that room.
Yeah.
That you would have the instincts, maybe with a little bit of time, to be on a stage and to learn that room in the same way. You get a sense for that crowd, that night, and that space.
That's true. I do. But so here's the rub to that is, if it was going to be something else, that would be fine. I guess I could make an attempt. But if it was going to be this, I think you talking to me one-on-one is I think I could ask you the same questions I asked you in the order I asked them. And if there was 100 people watching, your answers might be different.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so that's it. It's Schrodinger's podcast, right? Like if there's an audience, is it going to be different? And I feel like even though you are well aware, like you're under no illusions that we're doing this for an eventual audience,
right?
A theoretical audience, but it feels like because it's still just the two of us, even with that knowledge, like I think it changes when there's an audience. I don't know, but
no, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
But yeah,
you're wiser than you think, my friend.
But I'm going to go introvert. Final answer.
Okay. Final answer. And I will, I'll waive my usual psychoanalyst fee tonight.
Oh, good. That's good, because I don't know if I could afford you. And that completes One Final Question, Volume 5, which, as this is episode 140, we're just 10 more episodes away from my being able to start working on Volume 6. These are a fantastic way to look back. With a show like this one that just continues to be consistent, something that I'm very proud of, it does mean that I'm always on to the next one. And these episodes force me to sit down every so often and take a look back at the last 25. It's not really something I do often enough, but I enjoy looking back at all that's been accomplished. For me, that consistency is a point of pride, so I tend to forget all about what has happened in favor of looking and working ahead to what's next. Learn from my mistakes. Take more time to celebrate, publish, and complete than I do. One other thing. It's not just that it's never as easy as it looks. It's that decision-making can be hard. This, in my experience, is also especially hard for knowing what you want to do. Those stories of people who know what they want and go after it and are happy are shared exponentially more than the reality of people who don't know what they want or, as often is the case, are good at what they do but don't want to be doing it. As I recently wrote in the blog, I'm open to opportunities as they come, because at this time, I still don't know what I want for my future, though this podcast and that blog will undoubtedly be a part of it. I just don't think that together they are everything. I feel like there's more. I just don't know what it is. And do you want to know something? I'm okay with not knowing. That acceptance might be my age, growth, circumstance, or it could just be that now is the time to be as comfortable in my own skin as I can be, because it allows me to be better. Again, I don't have all the answers, but I hope that this podcast and my guests offer you some guidance or wisdom to educate you, or perhaps just a fun story to entertain you. Either way, I sincerely thank you for listening to episode 140 of the Palmer Files. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact my guests, Bill, Kristen, NJ, Essa, Stef, Jess, and Danno, plus myself, in the show notes. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heitur. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. Welcome to the after credits, where one final question usually goes. But as this was a compilation of them, I am just alone in the studio. So I'm actually going to take this opportunity to read for you something I don't do very often, the blog post that just came out most recently, which was titled A Reflection on Things Unfinished and Unwritten, which ties very well in with what you just heard me talk about. So, I will begin. I love this blog. It has been a constant pleasure to write and share all of these posts. It's not going anywhere, but it will probably change in some ways, as have I. Last year, I got married, and while I spoke about it with my wife, Stephanie, on 2 consecutive episodes of the Palmer Files podcast, retracing our relationship from meeting to wedding, I haven't mentioned it here. Why not? I wasn't sure there was a need to, but it was something that has changed in my life. Yet this blog continues chugging along with all of its warp speed velocity and with no brakes. Are there more changes coming? I don't know, but it's statistically more likely than not. I am always on the lookout for more opportunities, and I'm doing my best to take as many of them as I can. On the podcast and episodes that will air within the next few months, and in my real life, I've been talking more and more about careers being less linear for myself and those in my generation and younger. For us, there is no guarantee of a job, a series of promotions, or even retirement in the linear phases our parents and grandparents knew. It would look more like job, promotion, a series of seemingly disconnected jobs with a promotion thrown in here or there, and the hope for enough to retire. Why? Well, the Bureau of Labor Statistics median employee tenure was just about 4 years. 4 years. I know some people who can't figure out a new phone system in 4 years. Permanence in the workplace is fleeting, and if you find yourself reading this having been employed in the same place for more than 4 years, congratulations, you've beaten the bell curve. Anyway, I'm looking for opportunities, and not just for employment. Last year, I completed a 2-term stint on the board of directors for my local public radio station. This year, I have some feelers out. I'm not sure where I'll end up, but I know I want to help. Most of the time, these opportunities, especially to help, happen on an individual basis. Sometimes they get invoiced, and sometimes it's just me giving back, but it's always fulfilling, and I don't intend to stop. How will this impact my ability to write? I doubt that it will. How will it impact what I choose to write and share? Well, that I don't know at this time. I could walk into a room or digital meeting and be presented with a real employment opportunity, or get another board of directors invitation, or just learn the name of someone I should talk to. At this point, I'm open to anything. I would say that I'm currently as likely to find opportunities through podcast guests as I am in real life. And whether or not that's positive is not for me to know right now. But there are things out there, and there are things right here. Last year, I shot a short film. It hasn't been edited. That's on me. Last year, I made a note to write a few more personal style posts like this one. I wrote none. That's also on me. Last year, life came at me pretty fast, and as a result, I did not write an equal amount of non-book review posts as I did posts about books. That's much to the dismay of my trusty editor, Chris, who years ago warned me that this blog teetered on the edge of becoming only book reviews. Out of the 52 posts published last year on this blog, 34 of them were about books. Again, that's on me. I should edit the short film. I should check in a more personal way with you, my readers, and I should easily be able to make at least half of these posts about something other than books. Also, last year I bought one of those large KitchenAid mixers and became a baker of bread. Yeah, you read that right. 31 total loaves of bread have been baked by yours truly. 4 honey wheat, 6 dill, 1 cinnamon raisin, 3 Swedish rye, 2 egg, and 14 maple wheat loaves came fresh from my kitchen. Maple wheat was my personal favorite, and the bread turned me from a no breakfast guy to a 1 buttered slice of maple wheat toast with my morning coffee person. Is that enough of a change? I don't know that you'll really notice notes of breakfast in my writing. More certain, however, is that I've gotten older. My perspective has changed. Perhaps you've noticed it. Perhaps not. I like to think that I've been pretty consistent in who I am throughout the blog's run thus far, but of course, I always seem like me, so it's hard to tell. Anyway, I have my marching orders. I'll try to make my dive into video this year. I'll make attempts to be a little more personal. The note from last year said just a quarterly personal post, which means this is 1 of 4. And of course, I'll get my book review ratio back in check. Here's to opportunities and the only real constant in life, change. Happy New Year to you and yours from me and mine.